Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for having me again as the um, keynote speaker for the conference. I'm very excited to talk about a very new project about the measurement of climate change exposure at the UK firm level. We've been working on this project for roughly 2 years, uh, but the results still are, ongoing. So please do not cite without our permission. So if you want to learn more about the project, please let us know. This paper is joined with Daniel. He's from University College London, and we are working on finalizing the very last details of the paper. So very excited to talk about this. And I think there would be something interesting from it for everyone. So essentially, we're trying to look at the current situation in the UK, how firms in the UK talk about climate change, how much the firms are exposed to climate change. We're trying to measure the level of exposures that firms in the UK are to the emerging trends of climate change or sustainability. We then talk about the risk of climate change as well as some potential responses of the market, of the debt markets, of the newspapers regarding climate change exposure of UK firms. Okay, so before we start, I will talk a little bit about the I will talk a little bit about the um, motivations of the paper. So the climate change has been a very trending topic for the last 10, 20 years. It's not just about the science behind it, but also the consequences uh, that climate change can bring to our society, as well as the different impacts on firms and businesses. The complexity of the problem lies on how we can actually determine the effect of climate change on individual companies. To do that, we need to have a measurement of the exposure level that each company has towards climate change. While the physical climate change or the tightening of the regulations, the policy at the policy level, uh, particularly would bear financial burden on firms, we want to see the individual level, the individual effects of climate change on firms. And that is the motivation, the main motivation for this paper. We're trying to see how individually firms would be exposed to climate change. For that reason, in this paper, we're trying to develop some metrics, some measurement that can capture the unique exposure of each firm to climate change and risk. And then we can talk about the opportunities as well as potential responses firms towards the risk and also of funders, of investors to these firms. Um, so one problem with our question is that there has not been uh, a reliable measure or data to measure individual firm level exposure to climate change, right? So we're citing here a paper from a working paper from the Bank of England in terms of the gap in measuring the exposure as well as future climate policy expectations, as well as the risk at firms level in terms of climate change. And this lack of data and measurement has been treated as urgency recently as well. So, for example, the ONS, the official national statistics in the UK, mentioned that there was only 23% of the major enterprises have some disclosure on the climate change oriented strategy. Okay, so we are lacking the measurements, we're lacking the data so that the policy to increase awareness amongst UK firms as well as their investors and funders would be impeded. Okay. So in this paper, what we're trying to do is we do three things. First, we're trying to develop a firm level climate exposure measurement for the FTSE 100 companies, the biggest companies in the UK markets. We classify firms as proactive or non-proactive in addressing climate change. We try to do this in an annual basis. We then examine the relationship between the measurements of climate change exposures and how proactive firms are to climate change activities, uh, and link it with how climate change are being covered in the news. Okay, we would then link those details with the actual measures of climate change effects that firm can have. For example, carbon emissions from firm, some capital market behaviors, how the capital market react to the disclosure of firms regarding their climate change, as well as some ESG scores. So we're looking at an interlink, an interplay relationship between firms, newspapers, and their actual behaviors, and that is our aim. What we found was pretty alarming. So using machine learning, we categorize exposure into the four main areas: the physical risk to climate change, regulatory transition risk to climate change, opportunities and goals or initiatives, which is data from 2010 to 2022 for all of the available FTSE 100 companies. We found a strong correlation between firms' climate change focus and the Financial Times coverage. So there's a strong correlation between the news, the availability of the news related to climate change, and how much firms talk about climate change. The companies that emphasizing climate change opportunities show lower emissions presently and up to 2 or future periods. So if they feel that climate change can present opportunities, they could try to lower their emissions. Proactive firms facing higher regulation tend to have increased emissions, but this effect is somehow mitigated by other risk initiatives. In terms of the capital markets, proactive firms with heightened climate change awareness are valued more positively. So if they are more exposed to climate change, they are more likely to be valued highly in the capital market, while those facing greater regulations are discounted. Uh, but this can be mitigated for proactive firms. So our result really show a new angle in terms of firms' exposure to climate change and their initiatives to really combat them. Uh, we also we are also contributing to a very growing literature on using data from from conference calls, earning to generate a firm specific measure of climate exposure, as well as other option implied risks and risk premiums. These are the literatures that we are trying to contribute to. Okay, so how are we doing this? So in terms of the data, we are using the transcripts of quarterly earnings calls from all of the UK publicly listed companies in the FTSE 100 from 2010 to 2022. We are only using the firms that stay in the FTSE 100 listed company for the whole 12 years. There were only 46 such firms, and we are going to be using them for the entire periods. Any firm-specific financial data, we used the financial data information from Bloomberg. We used total assets, net debt, net property, plant, equipment, capital expenditures, and used as control variables for all of the tests. We also collect data on the ESG disclosure measure, the total greenhouse gas and carbon dioxide emissions as well as the Tobin's Q ratio. To measure how public attention towards climate change varies, we use the FTSE coverage as a measure. So we calculate this by using the 10 most popular words for each climate change category, for example, risk, regulation, opportunities and goals and initiative. So we try to create a new variables for to measure the coverage of climate change. Okay. So we use text detection algorithm, some machine learning techniques to and then use a comprehensive dictionaries to measure exposure to climate change. So essentially what we do is that when we look at a conference call, a quarterly conference call, we see the words related to climate change, and when we see how they are being appearing in the conference calls. Okay. We then use the constituent words from the dictionary to classify them into 6 potential outcomes. So that those would be opportunity scores, goals and initiative score, regulation score, risk score, and some climate score. Okay, so we try to count how many words, the frequency of the words appearances in the conference calls, so that we can attribute them into the 6 outcomes, and we see how the percentage of appearances of those words per the word count of the conference calls. Okay, so some of the results here. So as you can see, for opportunities, we have around 6,361 detected words. So these are the words for opportunities, for example, renewables, sustainability, hydrogen, natural gas, EV, and so on. We have fewer words for goals and initiatives, for example, the words related to net zero. So some aim for net zero, ESG, low carbon, sustainable business, net zero again, net positive, and so on. So these are the words that can be classified under goals and initiatives of the company. Words related to regulation, for example, coal, emissions, footprint, hydrocarbons, scope 3, pollution, and so on. Okay. Words related to risk would be some weather change, climate change, fire, wastewater, storm, flooding, planet, hurricanes, and freeze. So these are the words as defined by the dictionary as being the risk. And then other non-climate, other business activities, for example, sales, dividend, access, and so on. So obviously, because of the nature of the conference calls, these words would appear the most, okay, 125,000 detected words. Now, in terms of the summary, we are using quarterly firm observations. So we have about 600 firms observations. We measure the mean for the opportunity scores for all the firm around 3.1, which is much higher than goals and initiatives, regulation of risks. Okay, so these are the percentage of the words related to climate change opportunities compared to the total number of word count. About 3%, right? And so on. As you can see, on the business score would be around 90%. Okay. For the other financial firm level data from Bloomberg, we use the data for total assets, net debt, and so on. So as you can see, firms are ranging from around $1 billion company to $2 trillion company. Okay, so this is the BP. So pretty large company, I think. Okay. Right. And we also measure the firm level of the FT news coverage, right? So we have 12 years, right? And that will be about 3% of the 0.3% of the newspapers are related to firms' climate change. Okay. Now, let's look at a few of the regressions. So if we run a regression of the past news covering of climate change and the current exposure of firms related to climate change, as you can see, past news covering of climate change seems to be positively related to the current exposure of firms to climate change, which means if in the previous period, the news, the public is talking a lot about climate change, then the current conference calls, the management of the companies would be talking a lot about climate change as well. Okay. Now, how about the future news coverage? So we're trying to see whether firms reacted to what is going on with the news, with the current hot trend in the market, or they would be creating the trend in the market, right? So we want to see whether firm would follows what markets is thinking, or firms is setting the trend for the market. To do that, then in the second table, we are looking at the future news. So after the conference calls, how the news would be reacting to the firm's exposure to climate change. Actually, we see a very strong result. It seems to be the case that the market picked up on this. The market picked up on firms being very much exposed or talking about climate change during their conference calls. Um, so, which is a good thing, right? So it means that firms can actually set a trend in the market, so that the media would be picking it up, and then talk about that during the time. Now, how about firms when they talk about climate change, would they actually follow through with their behaviors? How would they really truly perform their their task of reducing risks to climate change when they talk more about that in their conference calls? So in here we are running a lack of the CO2 emissions and the current exposures of the climate change. As you can see, there seem to be no significant results. There seem to be no significant effect of firms' behavior or relationship between firm behaviors and what they talk about. It doesn't seem that like firms would follow through with their statements in their actual behavior. There's no significant results in here. How about the market? How the market think about firms closer? So as you can see, when firms talk more about goals and talk more about goals and initiatives, then they are pretty much offering a higher Toastman Q value. So the market values the firms who can talk more about goals, initiatives, as well as opportunities. They would sort of penalize firms that are exposed to more regulation risk of the climate change. Okay, for the risk and climate score, they seem to be having no effects. Now, how about the EHG score? So we have we have the measure that we calculated for each firm. How is it related to some external validation of the markets or of some auditors related to EHG? So we are here running a regression of the EHG score and the climate change exposure. As you can see, we have a very strong correlation, very strong association of the climate score. So they talk more about climate change during their conference calls and the actual external validation of their ESG score, as well as the environmental score, which is good. Okay. So I think it's been quite a long presentation. So I would like to I would like ooh, I would like to conclude. So in this paper, we introduce a new methodology to calculate firm level climate change exposure. We're trying to use a dictionary-based algorithm to do a textual analysis of the earnings conference call transcripts from the FTSE 100 companies. The score in this paper uniquely capture the proportion of earning calls dedicated to a specific climate change topic out of all climate change and business topics. And we identified four uh, potential fields that can be related to climate change in the earning conference calls. Okay. Uh, After developing the measures, we link it to the coverage, news coverage from the Financial Times, which is a leading British news source. We see that firms tend to place more weight on climate change issues when the issues are covered more in the FTSE, so in the FT Financial Times news. We also show that it is possible for a textual analysis of earning calls transcript to provide additional source of data for determining firm level climate change exposure that is not easily available or detectable from other firms' disclosures. As you can see, we validated our measurements by linking it with the ESG score or the environmental score. So we believe this is one of the first steps to create a comprehensive and systematic way of thinking about climate change at the UK firm level. Thanks very much.